It's tax time, so we're going to get some tips and some advice on how to protect yourself from a couple of fellas who work for the Internal Revenue Service. On our right here is Mike Batdorf. He is the special agent in charge of the IRS criminal investigations. And on our left is David Tucker, who is a spokesman for the IRS, working out of the Pacific Northwest, the beautiful Northwest. So, David, let's start with you. Our tax day is on the 17th this year instead of the normally dreaded April 15th. How come we're out in the middle of the week?
Well, it is good that we have a couple more days to file your taxes, which is great. The reason why it's on the 17th as opposed to normally what's on the 15th is because this year the 15th falls on a Sunday, and there's a holiday in Washington, D.C. called Emancipation Day that shuts down Washington, D.C. So that's why this year you have until Tuesday, April 17th to file your tax return.
And we've had that happen a couple of times recently.
Just depends on how the calendar falls, and so this year, again, you got 2 more days than you normally would.
Yeah, well, thank you to the citizens of our nation's capital for saving the rest of us. So when we're talking about, at this point, people who might be preparing last minute, are there some common mistakes they make?
There are, and that's why we always encourage people to file electronically. And the reason why is this. That tax software that you're using offers prompts and questions that helps you to identify both tax deductions and credits that you may not be aware that you're eligible for, as well as doing all your math computations. So we encourage people to file electronically, and then if you are getting a refund, to request direct deposit, so it goes automatically into your bank account. Now the thing on that is that if you're having a deposit directed into your bank account, make sure those banking account and routing numbers are accurate, because wherever you direct it to go, that's where the money's going to flow. So we encourage people to be accurate on that. I would also, other things to consider when you're filing is make sure you always keep a copy of your tax return, and make sure you sign and date it. I would also say that, if you find yourself using a tax preparer, make sure that tax preparer provides what's called a PTIN, which is a preparer tax identification number. That should be what they provide when they finish your tax return. And also remember, as a taxpayer, even though someone else is preparing your tax return, you are still responsible for what's on that return. So make sure it's accurate and review all those numbers, especially things like Social Security numbers and things of that nature. And if for some reason you feel that you can't meet the April 17th deadline, we do offer a 6-month automatic extension, and that's called Form 4868. You can access it easily on our website at irs.gov. But just remember that an extension to file is not an extension to pay. So people should still do like an estimate of what they think they would be owing, pay that amount, and that just reduces any sort of penalties and interest that would otherwise go against the remaining amount.
Okay, so I want to take a couple of those things one at a time. The first one is the preparer identification number, because these are people that, even though you're ultimately responsible for your own return, also have to show some level of competence and responsibility when preparing these things, correct?
Correct, because you're handing over to them a lot of personal and financial information. And so you want to make sure that that preparer is someone that you can count on. And there's a couple ways to kind of look at that. You could go to a Better Business Bureau and see if there's been complaints against a particular preparer. On our website, we have a directory of preparers that you can see if they're suitable for you. I would also see that you find someone that you can then work with after the filing season, because if there are questions about your tax return, you want the preparer with you to help answer those questions for you. And so I would say that make sure you have a credible tax preparer, because like I said, even though they're preparing that tax return, you are still responsible for what's on that return. That way you don't ever want to sign a blank return. You don't ever want to not review it yourself, and you always want to make sure you keep a copy of that as well.
And that's keeping a copy you can print after you e-file too, right?
Yeah, they should provide you with a copy. Even if you're electronically filing, you should be provided a copy as well. So you always want to keep that in your records, as well as with all the other documents that you have that support that tax return, like receipts and things of that nature.
Now, safe to say, if your preparer cannot provide you with one of those numbers, you're taking your chances there?
I would find someone that is abiding by the law, and so that that preparer tax identification number is a requirement, and so I would make sure that you're working with someone who knows what they should be doing, and B, providing everything according to the law. And so, CPAs and lawyers and folks of that nature often have a certain education level that they have to achieve and accreditation to be able to do what they're doing. So just kind of make sure that the person you're using to represent you is to the highest standard possible.
Now, you bring up a good point. What if your preparer, whether they have one of those identification numbers or not, gets a little too much back for you?
Well, and here's the thing, is that when you hear someone soliciting saying, we can provide you with a higher refund, or if their fees are tied to the amount of refund that you're receiving, I would be leery of that, because that means that they're working beyond perhaps pursuing a higher refund than you are actually eligible for. And so when you hear those kind of solicitations and things, it should be a red flag to you as to whether that person is someone you want to be working with.
Indeed. Now, as I understand it, there's a program that allows people to get of a certain income level that's relatively reasonably high to get free help preparing their taxes.
So we have a couple different programs. One is what's called Free File, and that's if you earn $66,000 or less. It's a tax software program that's provided by commercial vendors, and it's on our website at irs.gov, and that is the same tax software you would use on the commercial market, but it's provided to those who earn under $66,000, and it will do just what I said before. It will walk you through steps and help you identify those things that you could be eligible for, as well as doing your math, and then it'll help you file electronically. So Free File is one aspect. The other aspect is if you earn under $54,000 a year, and there's another program, we call it our VITA program, but it's a partnership that we work with organizations like AARP, Goodwill, and other nonprofit organizations that provide free tax return preparation. And what they do is they target like the disabled or the elderly or lower income. And what they do is they actually help you walk through and fill out your tax return. And so that's available as well. And what I would do is on our website at irs.gov, you can find the nearest VITA program that's near you just by putting in your basically your zip code, and it'll tell you within so many miles this particular organization is providing free tax preparation. So that's another resource that you can use as well.
Okay, so let's say for the sake of argument, you're a guy like my dad who would never even, he fools around on Facebook, but isn't going to file electronically and isn't going to go looking for where he might be eligible for deductions. Where can people who still want to do it the old-fashioned way find the information to help make sure that they're getting all the deductions to which they're entitled?
So I would always recommend, as a first stop, always go to our website at irs.gov, because that website has forms. You can download all the different forms that you need and print them out if you're going to be doing especially a paper return. And it has a variety of things like interactive tax assistance that are features on there that will actually walk you through questions and help you answer a lot of questions that you're looking for. I use it constantly because it's got everything and it's current, and it's a wealth of information that's available to you essentially 24/7. So you can do it anytime. Even if you don't have, let's say you don't have a computer, you can access it through a library or other ways that you can use. We also have an app that you could use on your iPhone or Android. It's IRS to go that you can also file electronically using that app. So there's a variety of ways to find information about how to do your taxes.
Now, speaking of things being current, I think it's a good time to remind people that the change in the tax code that's been passed hasn't kicked in yet, right?
Well, what I would say is that everything we've been talking about is actually for your 2017 taxes, which you'll be filing now. For 2018, which is the year we're currently in, what people should do is check their withholding. And the reason why is whenever you have a major change in life, such as a marriage or a divorce or a child or a tax reform, new legislation, what you should consider doing is this. A lot of times we fill out a W-4 when we join an organization, and we never touch it again. But when you have a change in life or a change in situation like legislation, you should look and see what you should adjust, how you should adjust your withholding, because the ultimate goal is to have a zero-sum balance at the end of the year, that you have neither a tax liability nor a tax refund. Because if you have a refund, that's money that could actually be in your weekly paycheck as opposed to something that you collect at the end of the year that the government's been holding this whole time. So look at your withholding. We have a new calculator called the withholding calculator on our website, and it incorporates all the new tax laws that are just occurred with the current legislation. And so then when you go and file in 2019, then hopefully you should come up with a zero balance between a tax liability and no refund.
All right, very good. Now, in terms of last minute tips and that sort of thing, have I left anything out that we should think about?
I would always say report all income. Be accurate in those returns. Make sure it's as accurate as possible. Make sure you include all your schedules if you're including a schedule with your tax return. And always keep documentation and get it in on time. If you can't get it on time, or if you have a tax issue, contact the IRS before it becomes a problem, because we want to communicate with the taxpayer and help them resolve whatever situation they're facing.
Yeah, I think a lot of people think you guys are ready to crack down at a moment's notice.
It's a collaboration. I mean, we want to work with people. The main thing is that tell us there's an issue, and we'll work with you to resolve it.
So that brings up one more, I think, very important question. Mm-hmm. You can do all your paperwork on time, be ready to go. If you don't have the money in the bank to pay the bill if you owe, mm-hmm. that's a problem. What can people do in that situation?
Well, we have a number of ways to pay, and there are installment agreements that you can set up. You can also pay by credit card if necessary. So it just the main thing is to communicate with the IRS and say, here's the issue, here's the situation I'm facing. How can we work this out? And you'll find a lot of those payment options are available on our website to kind of see which one fits your situation best, and we'll work with you to make that work.
Wonderful. So a couple of those questions brought a smile to Special Agent Mike's face. So, and you're here to talk with us about bad actors when it comes to tax filing. There was a list called the Dirty Dozen. Tell me a little about that.
The IRS, excuse me, the IRS does a really good job trying to update that Dirty Dozen list. Those are the top 12 tax scams, ID theft scams that we're seeing on a year-by-year basis, because they change every year. The bad actors and the criminals will adjust what they're doing as we investigate and as we put people in jail for these schemes. So, the top 12 this year, I don't have them all memorized, but I can tell you the first 3 or 4 are, phishing schemes, ID theft, impersonator phone calls. All of those schemes are relying on individuals to turn over their personal financial information. Those schemes do not work. They do not collect money if we can get the word out to stop giving away your personal financial information.
Yeah, I mean, that's critical. In fact, I was also just talking about that with our California State Controller, Betty Yee. One of the things that we've talked about, in our business here many times is these people that will get your Social Security number or find out how much your income, or even if they don't, they file a return with your name and Social Security number before you have the chance to file it so they can get money back in your name, right?
Absolutely. And that's, as we're coming up to the April 17th deadline, we start our media and our tours long before. File it before anyone else has a chance to do it for you. The last thing you want to do is end up in a situation when you hit send on that tax return and the IRS rejects it because the tax return's already been filed in your name. There's certainly ways that you can go about then working with the IRS to have your account flagged and go through the ID theft protocol, but no one wants to be in that situation. So we're recommending to people, the biggest scams that we're seeing now, don't click on any links in emails. The emails, I get 10 of them a day, and the newest scheme from the IRS that just came out, we released a press release over the weekend, is the IRS is now emailing people, supposedly, asking for information about their refunds and about personal information. The IRS will never email you. We don't have your email address. How do we know that? The IRS will never call you. Will never threaten to come arrest you, and we never demand payment. And we don't take payment by iPhone gift cards or by iTunes gift cards or any other gift cards. So those are all scams that are, they're relying on people, the fear in people, the general fear of the government and the IRS, and they're relying on people to give them their personal information. And if you get an email like that, delete it. and then go to the website that sent it to you. Whether it's a legit financial institution or your legit CPA, go to the regular website and conduct the business from there, not through that link. Because that link may take you to a spoofed website where you're just plugging in your information and giving it to a bad guy who's only going to do something nefarious with it.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, this question is probably for either one of you, but you mentioned e-filing. You get all the way to the end and you hit send, and it's rejected. Please tell me it saves the work at least, so you don't have to start from scratch.
Well, it depends on the tax software that you're using. But yeah, most of the time, if you're using like a commercial vendor, it'll retain that information that you inputted in there. I think, as Mike mentioned, the main thing is guard your personal and financial information like you would your cash. You know, be protective of that information. That means that shredding documents or receipts after you're done with them. If you're going to be including those receipts in your tax return, then make sure you put those in a safe place that will safeguard them, because you want to protect that information. And if for some reason someone is contacting you by either phone or email, and that's not how we initiate contact. We send a letter or a notice through the U.S. Postal Service. But if you ever have a question about your account, you can call the IRS directly at 800-829-1040 and speak with an actual IRS representative. There's also in Sacramento, there is a tax assistance center, and you can set up an appointment there as well, and that way you're speaking to an actual IRS representative.
Yeah, and then one of the smiles that you got from me was when talking about picking their tax return preparer, and David hit it right on the mark as far from criminal side is, you know, looking for, there's no special credits. There's no CPA that has his own credit or his own special thing that he can do with the IRS. It just doesn't work that way. So it's very important to pick your tax return preparer as much as you would a doctor or a church in your community. So focus on that tax return preparer. You know, the latest scheme, and another reason to do it though is the latest scam. The latest thing that they're doing is, so in the old days, ID theft, you'd find a social security number, and then maybe you try to find an associated address and birthday or something. You have to put it all together, you know. Now these cyber attacks and these hackers are going after return preparers, and they're going after CPAs, and they're getting all your legitimate information, one-stop shopping. They're filing a tax return in your name. It looks just like your other tax returns. Same W-2, same. They even put the refund in your bank account, the taxpayer's bank account. And then they go on IRS.gov and find where's my refund. Once it goes out, they call the taxpayer. Say, hey, this is the IRS, we accidentally sent you a refund. Taxpayer goes into their account like, oh yeah, you did accidentally send me a refund. Can you send it back to us?
So they've laundered it through the banks.
So now the taxpayer is sending the bad guy the money back, and they don't even realize that it was their fake, false fraudulent tax return that was filed to cause that refund. Again, we won't call you and ask for money. We're not going to send you emails. If an IRS criminal investigation agent knocks on your door, we have credentials, we have a badge, and we are law enforcement, just like FBI, HSI. We'll be able to show our identity to prove to you who we are.
All right, Agent, you bring up a great point. When will you come, let's say for sake of argument, a guy like me hasn't filed a return in 10 years. That's just one example. When will you come and reach out to a taxpayer when there's a problem and you need to demand payment? What can somebody expect? And I mean, because obviously they would know if they haven't done things right.
Yeah, they would know if they haven't done things right. So during the course of our investigation, we gather evidence, we gather information, and then at some point we will want to talk to the taxpayer. Sometimes we know their representation, we go through their attorney, or we may set it up by phone. And a lot of times we'll just go knock on the door and say, I'm Special Agent Mike Batdorf for the IRS Criminal Investigation. I'd like to ask you a few questions about your tax filings and your tax status. And we'll have our credentials, we'll have our badge out, we'll be a witness with us. And at that point, you can obviously get an attorney. You can refuse to talk. We can say, hey, come down to our office and we can talk. One thing we will never do is demand payment. IRS criminal investigation, we don't accept payment. You have to go to the IRS or go through one of the ways to make a payment. We're not going to accept cash. We're not going to accept gift cards. We're not going to accept anything, credit cards. We're not going to demand payment. So it would be just like I represented right there. Hey, we'd like to talk to you about such and such, and whether that's you're a witness to someone else's tax status or you're under investigation, we'll tell you right then and there, you're under criminal investigation for filing a false tax return.
I would venture to guess that by that point, whomever has already received several letters from the IRS in the mail or some other form of communication that is obviously from the IRS.
Many times in our tax investigations, yes. I mean, this is not the first time they've had a run-in with the IRS was when we knock on the door. There's plenty of mail going back and forth. Mm-hmm. There's probably a lot of history on the civil side that turns into a criminal investigation when you add up some overt acts that they may or may not have taken.
And taxpayers have a Bill of Rights. There's a Taxpayer Bill of Rights that has 10 different rights that are identified. It's on our website. One of those is to be able to appeal a decision. Mm-hmm. And so look over those Taxpayer Bill of Rights if you're concerned. But like I said, in most cases, if you just communicate with the IRS, we can help resolve these problems early on so they don't become a bigger problem where we have to get to a criminal investigation side of the house. It's all about communication.
And is it also true that if you let it go and you owe for a while and the interest and penalties build up, that eventually there'll be a lien money taken out of your bank accounts, or they'll come and, tow your car away or that sort of thing?
So those are possibilities that we never want to arrive at, and so there's a lot of other steps in between. We have a whole collection program that kind of takes us through some gradual steps to achieve. But I think the first step is to, if you're a taxpayer and you're in a situation where you have a tax liability and you can't pay that amount, the first thing you should do is say, look at your payment options, see what you can accommodate. And in some cases, we also have a program called Offer and Compromise, and we'll work with taxpayers who have a tax liability if they can't pay, if there's a hardship in particular. But I would say communicate with the IRS what your situation is. It's better to create a dialogue than to have us, as Mike had said, start sending you letters and eventually show up at your doorstep.
I think that's a good point, because I would imagine the average guy that doesn't know anything about it would be scared if they can't pay their taxes.
Well, and that's why you'll get a notice through the U.S. Postal Service. That's the first step. That's the first step that the IRS is communicating to you that there's an issue. Your next step determines where it all lands.
Okay, well, guys, we've covered a lot of ground. Is there any other message that either of you needs to get out?
I'll just add one thing from the criminal investigation side, because a lot of people don't know who we are and what we do. But we are out there protecting the American taxpayers from fraud and from schemes and from fraud and some schemes and just last month right here in Sacramento, there were 4 guys sentenced, and they got 6.5 years in jail for filing false tax returns in someone else's name. I mean, it's that serious of a crime that we're now, you're talking multiple years in jail because they filed, I think it was 100 some tax returns for $600,000 in refunds. Stealing from the U.S. government is not the way to get your money.
And the criminal investigation side of the house, they have a high conviction rate. So the best thing you can do is not do it.
Highest of all federal agencies in the U.S. government.
That means you have good lawyers too, doesn't it?
Yeah.
Absolutely.
All right, very good. IRS spokesman David Tucker and the Special Agent for the Criminal Investigations Division, Mike Batdorf. Appreciate both of you coming by.
Thank you.
Thank you.